Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
Okay, now that we have the model trimmed and we've removed the dies, we're ready to trim them. And we'll just take them out of the model, and the model we'll put aside. We don't want to get any grindings from the dies inside the die pins of the model, the die pin holes of the model, so the dies would not seat properly. At this point, we're just going to take off the excess wax that we've had there, and the matrix strips should come off at this point. And we'll just start cleaning up these dies just a little bit. Now that we've taken the excess wax off both dies, taken the matrix strips off them, we're ready to start trimming. A useful instrument for trimming is a heatless stone mounted on the mandrel. And you notice we've trimmed this heatless stone on the true stone so that it's cut back about a 45-degree angle with the smaller diameter mounted away from the mandrel. And what we're going to do is use this in a straight handpiece here in such a way that we are going to be coming into the die. The larger diameter will cut ahead of the smaller diameter, and we'll simply undercut all the way around that cervical margin and expose it. So you can see we're starting to come in here now, and we will just keep coming around, and I like to go around the whole perimeter of the die and just start to zero in on it instead of doing one edge to finish and continuing on. Just get the gross reduction here first. You can see on this mesial where we had quite a bit of retraction, we don't have to do very much trimming. We're just going to smooth up to the tooth there, and we don't have to cut all the way up to the margin. In fact, you're better off staying as far from you as you can from the margin and leaving the impression of the unprepared root surface there, because this will help you in guiding your contouring of your restoration. So all I'm trying to do is remove the overextension of silver that was left from the plate. I'm not really trying to reduce the silver all the way up to the margin. And we're almost done here. You notice I'm keeping my finger on the die because the die will get hot as we work. And if it gets too hot, it will actually start to melt the Duralay, and the silver will raise up off the Duralay. So it's extremely important you keep your fingers in contact with metal so that you can monitor the heat that you're putting into this die. Now, if we look at the lingual, the margin is running right along here. And you can see that we've got some cut silver down here fairly close to it. And it's hard to show on this TV tape, but it's a little rough here. If I come down here, I catch on that excess of silver, and it is not smooth. It is not a well-exposed area. The heatless stone, however, will keep burnishing this silver ahead of it, and you can actually just keep burnishing that silver up and chase that margin up and actually cut the margin short. On the molar here, where the silver is actually plated up, the margin's hiding down under here. You can see it right down at the base. But if you look from the side, the silver is well above the margin. Now the advantage of this instrument here is, you can see I'm going to be cutting down below and removing the support for that overhanging silver, and in a little bit you'll just see that whole piece fall away, exposing the margin. And this is something you have to get used to doing. It's done blind. And if you get a little nervous that you're getting a little bit too close, you can come up and test this with your fingernail, see if that'll pull down yet, and you can see it's too strong to pull off. So we're just going to keep slowly undercutting that surface. And this should be done, as I'm showing you here, with a kind of a sweeping motion, so you're working on the whole surface. You can't just hit a part of that surface, because if you hit a part of it, you could actually be cutting into the margin, and the rest of the silver would be supported in other areas. There you see I just flipped the whole piece off, and you can see that exposed margin. And now, of course, we will switch probably to the green stone shortly, because we're very close to that margin and we don't want to keep burnishing silver ahead of this coarse stone. We want to remove that excess silver. So we're just going to finish this trimming procedure with the green stone. And now that silver will just kind of fall off as we undercut it away from the remaining bulk of silver. You can see little bits of silver just flaking right off as we come after it with this green stone. Now, as I run my instrument down over this area, as I showed you before, it hung up on the overhanging silver. Now, as I run down, it just goes down smoothly over the margin. And if you look very closely, you can still see the margin intact, some uncut silver down below the margin, which is an impression of the root surface of this tooth, and then we have the trimmed die. You notice in this procedure I did not cut the die base back. The die base is its original width, both buccolingually and mesially distally. Now there are times when we'll want to reduce this die base a little bit, but in general the base portion is left unaltered, and our trimming is all done up here, and that is accomplished with the aid of this trimmed heatless stone. We're ready to make some acrylic copings that we will use to secure a bite registration from the patient, and also they can be utilized to prove that our dies are accurate. The first step that we want to do here is we will lubricate the dies with a Duralay lubricant, and this works best if the die is slightly warmed. We can just pass it through the flame and then paint some lubricant on the die. Now this is a very, very thick, almost like Vaseline, and we obviously can't leave that much lubricant on the die and get a good adaptation. So again, if we just lightly flame this and take off our excess to allow us to have a nice, smooth, well lubricated surface. And here we have a properly lubricated die. The boxes are not plugged up with lubricant, and on the molder die the retentive grooves are not plugged up with lubricant, although they are well lubricated. And now we're going to use a powder and liquid of technique with Duralay to paint up a coping. First we should wet the brush, and we need a small brush. A triple-aught brush is the one to use. Don't try to use a big large inlay brush. It's just too large. You won't be able to do this properly. And you can see that I picked up that initial increment, and now by keeping the proper consistency we'll just kind of pat this right to where we want it to go, and we can paint this right down to our margins. And what we will do is just continue right around this die. Since Duralay shrinks, if we were to go around the whole perimeter of this die all at once, then the shrinkage would grab hold of the die very tightly. We'd have a very difficult time getting it off, and in fact may fracture it trying to get it off. So what we're going to do is paint up 1/2 of the bonnet at a time. Then that half will be allowed to totally cure. We'll remove it, re-lubricate it if necessary, and then do the second half. And you can see I'm just controlling the consistency of this Duralay. I don't want to get it too wet so that it runs all over everything. And I do that by wetting the brush, picking up the powder, and you can see there that the powder is still got a little dry area in it. And then when I touch this surface, it just goes right to place and does not run. Now here we have our first half of this bonnet painted up, and you can see that I've painted it right to the margins. We have a smooth surface, and 1/2 of the die is done. Now we will get a better surface on the set Duralay if this sets underwater than if we let it set out in the air, because the water will tend to keep the Duralay liquid from evaporating. So once I'm satisfied with the way this looks, I'll simply place it in a bowl of water and let that half set there while I do the first half of the second die. Now the first half of this bonnet is now set and it's ready to be removed. And usually this is very readily done simply by taking a number 7 spatula, the broad end there, and just engaging the acrylic and pushing up, and it will pop up. This one seems to be a little more stubborn. So here we have the first half of the bonnet, and you can see that it's well adapted. The retentive grooves are all present in the bonnet, and it goes back onto the die accurately. And so now we're ready to do the second half. Now because that came off with some difficulty, I will go ahead and re-lubricate this tooth to be sure that it doesn't seal on too tightly. Again, pick up your first increment, control your consistency, and paint that right down to the margin. Now you can see that first one's just a little bit wet, so we're going a little drier consistency the next time. That's just a little too dry, so I pick up just a little bit of moisture on the brush, and it just flows right where I want it to go. And we'll just continue to work right around the die in this fashion. Now when you're done with the painting procedure, it's very important that you clean your brush simply by putting it in liquid and brushing it out on a towel. You want to do this to avoid having to buy a new brush every bonnet you make. And we'll let this set underwater. And these should just be removed the way that we did the first half. Just get the 7 spatula underneath the edge of the bonnet a little bit. Don't engage the margin of your die, but engage the acrylic just above the margin right in this area. And you can see that pops up, and when we push it back down, it does go down and cover our marked margin. It does not rock, rotate, or spin. The molar, similarly, we will just engage the acrylic and try to bring it up. If we look at the inside, we can see that we have a good a good adaptation of Duraly into our retentive grooves. It's complete. And similarly, if we look at the bicuspid, we have a good adaptation of the occlusal isthmus and the boxes. Okay, now we have the bonnets completed, but as we've pointed out, the margins are a little bulky. And an easy way to correct that is to use a mounted rubber wheel and simply smooth that contour off. And this is a handy thing to do if you're going to use this bonnet to check the margins, because a grossly over-contoured area is very, very difficult to use to check margins. So as you can see, I'm just coming down. I'm using a mounted rubber wheel here, and I'm coming down. I'm not hitting the die. I'm just smoothing the bulk of that bonnet down. And we'll just go all the way around this, come right down to that margin, and take the unwanted bulk off. Here we have the mounted patient model, and this has been completely adjusted to a long centric. You can see if we move this from centric occlusion to centric relation, we do have it adjusted to a long centric. You can see the incisal pin will move back and forth, and we do not leave the table. The thing that we're going to do now is record this bite so that we can mount the working models. And the first step is to analyze the centric occlusion contacts. So in order to do that, we're going to use shim stock. This is 5/10,000ths of an inch thick, and this will be what we will use to determine whether or not we have occlusal contact. Now, as you can see, we put it between our second molars, and it does not hold. And this is just the weight of the articulator. Here we have the first molar, and this holds. So we would record this as a centric occlusion stop on the patient's record form. Here we have another stop, a lighter stop on the second bicuspid. So we have the first molar, second bicuspid, come up to the first bicuspid, and the shim stock slides through on the cuspid. We'll turn the case around and check the anterior teeth here, and we can see that they slide through, and so does the first bicuspid on the other side. Now, obviously, in the area of the preparations, we will not have a contact. When you're doing this, examine your articulator to make sure that it holds its centric occlusion location precisely. If you look at the particular articulator I'm using here, this adjustment screw that establishes centric occlusion, if we put a little bit of pressure on it, let's see if we can show it to you, it moves. So if we screw this down tight and lock it in centric occlusion, we no longer have centric occlusion. Check that on your instruments. It makes it a lot tougher to mount. We're going to have to try to work with this just by turning that lock in there just a little bit. You can see we've got it locked, but not nearly as securely as it should be. It's a problem with this specific articulator. So check that on each one of yours, and if you can lock this tightly, that's the way to do it. Okay. Now that we have analyzed centric occlusion, we know what our centric occlusion stops are. We've previously fabricated the Duralay bonnets. We'll place them on the prepared teeth now and check and make sure that they fit stable. As you can see, we're going to put it on the bicuspid here and test it. It does not wiggle, and the molar does not wiggle. So we're ready to take the bite. Our first step will be to make sure that the bonnets are out of centric occlusion contact. And you can see here that they are definitely in contact. If we look at the incisal pin, it's way off. And we can look at the adjacent teeth, and we'll see they're way off contact. What we'll do is use some articulating paper, close down the patient on the bonnets to register the high spot. And you can see the blue mark on this Duralay bonnet, and we're going to remove that high spot until the patient can close into centric occlusion. You want to take a little caution here. Make sure you do not grind through the bonnet and into your preparation. We'll close it down and test it again. We're still hitting on the bonnets. Use the articulating paper. And we'll just continue to do this until we have cleared all occlusal contacts from the bonnets. Now we have spent some time and we have adjusted the bonnets, and you can see that now we are holding on our original centric occlusion stops. And if we turn the instrument around and show you on the bonnets, we slide through. There's no contact on the bonnets. So now what we want to do is select an opposing cusp that we can capture in Duralay to create our bonnet bite. Usually you will use the maxillary mesiolingual, the mesiolingual cusp of the maxillary second molar, and the cusp of the bicuspid. You can see where those will occlude on the bonnet. So we're just going to estimate that area, and we're going to put some powder and liquid in those spots and capture that cusp for the bite. I'll put just a little liquid on each bonnet, pick up some powder and liquid, drop it right into the area where that cusp tip should come. And let it set there a little bit to lose its gloss and get less sticky. And there it's just starting to lose its gloss. So we're about ready to close this articulator in centric occlusion and take a centric occlusion bite. Just push down a couple times to center the articulator and then let go of it and let it set under its own weight. Okay. After the Duralay is set, open your articulator and inspect the stop areas. And as you can see here, we've captured the lingual cusp of the maxillary bicuspid and the mesiolingual cusp of the maxillary molar. And the only thing really wrong here is that the indentations are a little larger than we would like to have them. What we're looking for is capturing the cusp tip, and it should be about 2 millimeters in diameter. We don't want this too large. Now, let's just see how successful we were at capturing centric occlusion. To do that, we're going to check it with a shim stock again. We'll put it in the stop area. You can see that we hold shim stock. Put it in this stop area on the bicuspid. And again, we hold shim stock. And then we will turn the instrument around, and we know that the first molar and the second bicuspid should hold shim stock. And there's the first molar, and there's the second bicuspid. So if we can reduce the size of these stops now to the ideal size and still have the stops who are going to be in good shape. The reason you want these stops small is that usually you will be articulating against a model, not the actual patient model, not the plastic model that we have on this. This is our actual patient. We will not make an opposing model. When you do this clinically, however, you will make an opposing model. Now, because of the setting expansion of stone, the slight inaccuracy of alginate impression material, you cannot be guaranteed that the occlusal surface on that model is exactly the same as the tooth. So the smallest portion you take, the better off you're going to be. So you just capture a cusp tip. And these are about the size that you would like. They're as small as we could make them and yet have a positive indentation of the opposing cusp. It must be positive. It's a concave area, something that you can lock into for when you hand articulate these models. Now that we've made that adjustment, let's be sure that we still have contact and there's the molar, and there's the bicuspid. Second bicuspid, and first molar. So now when we mount the working model, we're going to want to be sure that we have contact on the first mandibular molar, second mandibular bicuspid, and the two bonnets. Okay, we've taken the lower model off the articulator and replaced it with a mounting ring, and we have put the bonnets on the working model and checked, make sure that they're stable on the dies. And now we will articulate the patient model onto the upper, or the working model onto the upper patient model. And you can see this goes in place without any rocking or rotations. The base of our working model is very smooth, and in order to help it adhere to the mounting plaster, we're going to score that before we actually mount it. And you don't have to do an awful lot of scoring. Just take a lab knife and mark some spots on the bottom of the cast. Now that the bottom of the cast has been scored, we would like to place some wax over the ends of these dowel pins to guarantee that we can reach them after the case is mounted. I've just taken some utility wax and rolled it up into a little bar, and we'll place it so that it goes from the dowel pin out beyond the edge of the model. And then if we have to, we can remove this wax and put an instrument in there to push the die pin out. Next, we'll articulate our model, and we will lute it in position using some sticks and some compound. When you do this, it's important that you center the model. So rotate it, get it in there, kind of wiggle it in, get its best position, then get your thumb up over the model and keep it arched as I'm doing here. You notice my thumb isn't down here, it is high on that model. You have to push in the center of that model. Otherwise you will actually rock the model and get an inaccurate mounting. While you're holding it in this fashion, I'm going to heat up some compound, and you have to use a dry cast in order to mount this. Put some compound on the flange of your cast and then on the flange of your patient model. Take a piece of stick, place it there, and be sure this is well luted in place. We're going to use at least 4 of these sticks to hold this cast in place. Now we have completed luting the lower model to the upper, and you can see that 4 sticks have been used with compound. And now, since we've done it this way, we can actually pick the instrument up, and we don't have to turn it upside down. We can just bring it right down like this as we mount it. So the next step that we're going to want to do is to moisten the bottom of this cast. And to do that, you don't need to get real fancy. Just take a saturated paper towel and get the water on it. Let it set there as you mix up your impression plaster. We have a nice creamy mix of impression plaster. You can put some on the base of your model, and you're going to have to hurry here. And then put some in your ring. And build a mound of plaster up. I'll hold that. For luting these two models together. Push it down until the pin touches. And don't use a lot of pressure here. You don't need it. And this is your initial mounting. This does not have to be neat. What you're going to do when this sets is take the sticks off, check and make sure your mounting is accurate. If it is, then you can fill in with plaster here and make sure that you have enough plaster so that the model does not break off the ring. Okay, after the plaster is set, you can pop the sticks off, and while that plaster is wet, you're going to have to be a little careful. So carefully remove these sticks. And now you can open the articulator and verify that the stops that we had before on the patient are the same as on our mounting. There you can see that we have the stop on the first molar. There's the stop on the second bicuspid. Here's the stop on the molar bonnet and the stop on the bicuspid bonnet, and the first bicuspid and the anterior teeth are out of contact. So we have transferred this over accurately, and now we would fill in with plaster the area between the ring and the model to make sure that we have a strong mounting that would not break off.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.